I'm Mel.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Beck. And this is We Are Woman. In this episode of the We Are Woman podcast, Sarah and Mel sat down with Dan Kurlapski, co-founder of Breathwork Byron and Yesan Conscious Leadership, alongside our very own Sarah, and someone who has spent years exploring what it means to live and lead from a place of presence. In this conversation, they explore something that feels incredibly relevant to all of us, especially women who are used to holding a lot. That consistent sense of being on, doing, achieving, managing, and pushing. And the question becomes, is that actually who we are? Or is it just a system that's been running for a long time? They dive into Dan's idea of relaxed intensity, what it means to stay grounded and calm even in the middle of a full and busy life. And they talk about identity, the roles we attach to, the patterns that drive us, and how breath work can create space between who we are and what we've learnt to be. This is a conversation about awareness, about the nervous system and finding a different way of moving through life. One that doesn't require you to push so hard to hold it all together.
Dan, we are so honoured to have you on the podcast today. And it's really exciting to have someone who's been such a big part of all that we've done here. Can you tell us a bit about your journey? What's led you into this work, or what you feel you're really about, and how FBR Breathwork has also been a big part of that?
Yeah, cool. Big question. Thanks, Mel. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, it feels really good to be here. Yeah, a little bit about my journey, and to keep this in a nutshell. Yeah, it kicked off, I think, early days with having an Eastern European father that had brilliant ideas of some useful conditioning, and parts of it not so useful, but he would place me in front of a TV for hours and hours watching Bruce Lee and any film really that held a never say die attitude. Cool Runnings, Karate Kid, Mighty Ducks, all of them. and uh, and so I grew up on a lot of that. So much so, like, he put me into little athletics, and I had finished the race, but I didn't know that the bell meant it was the last lap. And he's coming up next to me, and he's like, "You're finished, you're done." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." He's like, "No, you're finished. You can stop." I'm like, "No, I'm not." And so I kept on running, and then found out later, and all the kids were laughing at me that I'd done that extra lap. So that was real evidence that his early conditioning of never say die had worked, and had played a really useful role for me, but it also primed my mind in a beautiful way for a lot of this work and mindset work. It started off as mindset work, picking up my first book. It was handed to me by my neighbor when I was 16, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. And, that completely sort of enthralled me, that humans are walking around with different perspectives, looking at the exact same thing. And I remember the exact page that was in that book that kind of communicated that. And so, yeah, went off and did exercise and sports science. I was a pretty active kid, and I was like, what do I do with my life? I'd love to work with sports, and, kept saying that I was going to work at the highest level of football as a player or otherwise, and ended up studying physiotherapy, doing work experience, and ended up at Sydney FC. And yeah, I was working as a physiotherapist there, I was in partnership, business partnership, and then that had come to a completion, new business partnership with physio clinics. And 2.5 years into that, I was like, oh, am I passionate about this? Like, doing physio, I was working the work-life balance that I wanted. It was 4 days of work in the clinic, then working on the clinic and so on. 3-day weekends was all I wanted back then. And it was a hard no I'm not passionate about this per se, but so I had to go on to a bit of a journey to explore, okay, well, what is it that I love about physio, but I can do outside of physio as well? And it was really just working with humans and getting on the same page with them as to how they're wanting, what would it look like to live in alignment with yourself, and supporting them in that. And in the physio context, it was to be able to move so that they felt better, so that they could be pain free, they would be better humans to be around, and so on and so on. But I realized that, oh, I can attend to the body, I can also attend to the mind. And then I went off on a journey of, yeah, meditation that came off the back of a very uh, intense 3-month encounter with a French woman that had all of a sudden stopped. And my best mate was like, why don't you do this thing called meditation? And I was like, what, just sit there with my hands like this and cross-legged and sit there for hours. And he was like, just go and do the course or whatever. And so I did a beginner's, intermediate, master Brahm. Sort of said to me after one of the classes, he's like, Dan, because I'd asked so many questions, you're going to become a teacher. And I was like, 24 years old, physiotherapist, driving back 9:30 p.m. at night. And I'm thinking, what the fuck is Master Brahm talking about? Back then, to teach meditation, like, what does it mean to teach meditation? And 6 months later, I ran my first, 10-week meditation and mindset course. And then, a retreat a year after that. And it all kind of continued there with my own coaching, deep spiritual inquiry work for many years, spending time in the jungle, uh, with ayahuasca and the Shipibo tribe there, which is super close to my heart, and a few Vipassanas, 10-day silent meditation retreats in Japan, in Australia, and yeah, coaching for the last 10 to 15 years, with leaders within businesses, leaders of businesses, and entrepreneurs and founders. So yeah, that's how I've kind of landed here. And yeah, so a lot of the work was very much, it wasn't without the body, but it was healthy. It was about healthy mind structures. It was about expanding the identity beyond the roles of what we do, but to include the roles, and to really connect with the absolute version of what we are, and as divinity, and one, and being one with it all, but also embracing the very humanness of being a human and this life as a human being. And with that, kind of bringing those two planes together, being a beautiful unity, if we want to think of a version of unity. And so there was mind somatic mapping, which is incredibly powerful, but nothing that went fully beyond words, outside of what I'd experienced with psychedelics and plant medicines and the responsible use of those. And so, yeah, I remember turning to my back then partner, Sarah, and saying, listen, we need to do this breathwork thing, because breathwork was something that we would include as this rounding out of a retreat, and would bring in facilitators for that. And it was Wim Hof to start off with, and then they weren't available. So then we had a couple come in, and they were doing more rebirthing style. And I was like, need to explore this further. I was having experiences that were very akin to those that I was having in the jungle and so on. And so with ayahuasca, and yeah. So then rebirthing was the first piece, 21-day practitioner training that we held, but also we ran it, but we're also students of. And then super lucky to have the support teacher there know of Edward's work already. And he was saying, the way that you guys go about your work, you would love how this guy Edward goes about his work. So I checked him out, and I was like, let's give this 2-week taster a go in Bali. And after 2 sessions, in the middle of going through a 12-month business separation that was, running the physio clinics for 11 years, there was a lot going on in my life at that point in time, severe, physical injury. And to experience myself as myself again after 2 sessions even though I felt I was doing a pretty epic job of staying somewhat within my window of tolerance, but kind of maybe just at the edge of it for a prolonged period of, 2 to 3 years. But um, to then kind of land back in myself and have that spaciousness within myself and have this body and the challenges that it was going through to feel like home again was super special. So, you know, two sessions, and I took this guy, Edward, that I'd only known for 2 days, to dinner and said, listen, whatever we end up doing, I want to contribute a percent of our revenue to the research that you're doing in breath work. And without a single thought, he just responded with, why don't you take the logo and start Breathwork Byron? And I went back to my accommodation that evening and secured the domain breathworkbyron.com.au, and it's been such an epic ride with Stephen, Edward, Sarah, myself as a team, kind of helping bring this to Australia and supporting humans here as practitioners, but also the people that are really embracing this particular approach to not just breath work, but healing in and of itself. So, yeah. And healing not because you might need, I didn't feel like I needed deep healing, otherwise my life would end, although it can be really useful for that. But healing also for the purpose of thriving as a human being and feeling connected to oneself and everything else, and being able to be of greater service in my business and to a team and to a community and so on. So yeah, both sides of what healing might represent.
Mm. Yeah, more what I'm hearing in that last piece. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is more healing on behalf of resilience potentially, and increasing our capacity as human beings to show up more fully in life and show up more fully as ourselves. Yeah.
I have a lot of clients that'll kind of say, because they're incredibly successful and they've already, by the measures of success of our Western world and so on, and have built incredible businesses, and they're just feeling like, I just want to feel alive again. Yeah, I just want to
Hmm.
connect with myself. I want to feel alive again. And so, yeah, being able to live well, to feel alive, and yeah, I think and to thrive, and resilience is a part of that. What stops us from that happening, or from that being a lived experience, is a really powerful question to ask.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, really hearing your journey from kind of body into mind, back into body, and coming full circle in that. And yeah, really curious also to understand more deeply, how is FBR breathwork different maybe than other breathwork approaches in your mind? And why do you feel particularly passionate to bring that to leaders and founders as, I guess, a group of humans that you really work with specifically? Curious around those pieces.
Yeah, for sure. And so, to start that off, I'd love to say that I think all approaches, and this, I'm going to say most, just because I don't tend to like to speak in absolutes, but most 99% of approaches to breath work are likely to have a time and place for that approach to breath work. Yeah. So I'm a huge, I feel like I champion the work of FBR, not because it's FBR, but because I so deeply believe in the principles of FBR. So when I came to FBR, I wasn't looking for I wasn't looking to simply become a breathwork practitioner and just see, oh yeah, what would let me be a breathwork practitioner so I can do this thing called breathwork. The reason,
Mm.
I'm working with FBR in the way that I am is because the principles of FBR and how it is taught and how it is delivered so closely resonate with my life philosophy and how I go about this work anyway. And I guess just to provide a bit of context around that, it's like sometimes breath work can be mistaken to be about the big experience and the big cathartic experience. And, you know, often people are coming in feeling like, oh, let's keep activating because the more that I'm going to activate, the more I'll get out of it. Remember the Nutri-Grain ad?
Mm.
You only get out what you put in, right? So it was kind of, I don't know how many people around the world will know Nutri-Grain for all of your listeners across the world. So it's true, but what you're putting in doesn't always have to be forced. So what you put in is what you get out. For me these days, the way that I would say that is, how are you meeting life?
Mm.
Yeah, how are you like coming face to face with life itself and everything that is emerging in life that might feel uncomfortable, that might feel like an intensity. But also we have to remember, and particularly in this space of the healing space, is that like it's not like the focus to not be solely on like, oh, it's so intense, or it's only intense with like these, if we label good, bad, negative emotions, also like meeting life and the medicine of life in the intensity of its capacity for joy.
Yeah.
And why might we not be, what is it that's playing out in mind, in body, based on our past that might be limiting our capacity to experience joy to the fullest, whether that comes down to, am I worthy of that joy?
Mm.
Am I, yeah, do I consider myself not to be capable to be able to hold that much happiness, that much joy? And so, whatever it might be. So full spectrum is what
Mm.
I love. I'm going to bring this full circle now about FBR, that it's become epic at activating and also become epic at being able to genuinely restore, relax, and integrate whatever the stimulus was that activated your system and, stressed it in the best of ways. Receive the full gift of that by being able to genuinely relax. And that goes for like the stimulus of a business, the stimulus of life, the stimulus of a difficult conversation with a partner or a team member. That like all of those are stirring things up and are gifts that are ready to be received by us if we have the means and capacity to be able to then like integrate that, to be able to like let the pieces land and really receive the nectar that's available there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, really beautiful. It's yeah, what I'm hearing in your words, maybe in a kind of a different way I would word that or phrase that, is really just staying calm within the variety of different experiences as a human, whether that's deep rest or whether that's deep joy, or excitement or all sorts of wild stuff. Can we stay within, I'm gonna say calm, maybe better worded, well, can we find peace in all of it and find pleasure maybe in all of those different kind of variety of emotions and
Well,
experiences of life? And ultimately
yeah.
that would make
Sorry.
life way more, I guess, easy. Yeah. Yeah. And it's still curious, right? Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And it's still curious what made you choose particularly to work with this modality, particularly with leaders and founders? Like why those people?
Yeah, cool. I'd love to just, that word calm and how that links,
Mm.
even to say the whole Bruce Lee piece and exposure that I had to Bruce Lee early on in my life. Bruce Lee, one of the core principles for Bruce Lee was relaxed intensity. And in the last 2 years, I started to revisit because I was reflecting on how I ended up where the hell I am today doing what I'm doing. And I was like, Bruce Lee started to come back into my field in the last couple of years. And I revisited this relaxed intensity piece and I was like, oh, hang on a second, that's what FBR is. Yeah, that's why I view the potential for a human to live to their fullest potential is if they can develop the capacity for the full spectrum, which is to be able to be relaxed in the face of all of life's intensities. Yeah, because we know with this work that, and I know that you guys know this as well, that life doesn't get easier, but our capacity to handle it expands, which gives us this lived experience of actually this feels easier now, even though
Mm.
life isn't necessarily getting easier. And so, relaxed intensity, I started to use calm momentum, because I felt like even if I use the word relaxed intensity in my like, posts or marketing or whatever else, some people might not be gung
Mm.
ho to try and experience more intensity. They're trying to like, don't give me more intensity. We can't shy away from the natural intensities and emergence of intensity in life. Maybe that comes later down in the process. And so calm momentum represents a very similar piece where it's being calm, but doesn't have to mean losing momentum. Yeah. And so
Mm.
this links into your question, Sar, around working with leaders and founders. I love working with business leaders and founders because their minds are incredibly, and when I say their minds, I consider myself to be an entrepreneur and to be a business person and so on. And I really love business as service, right? But their minds are so incredibly brilliant, right? Their capacity to be able to see opportunity and possibility in context out there is incredible, to like naturally be drawn to finding a solution. Like, there's a way, we can find a way
Mm.
here. And there's a bit of a, I guess, byproduct as a result of this mind that has the capacity to like kind of, it can look messy potentially from the outside, but it's also what gives it the capacity to be able to like weave its way and find possibility in things. That mind at the same time can find it challenging to be able to rest and be still, or to find stillness behind that mind. And so, yeah, I'm in full support of these human beings that are showing up to life in their own unique, beautiful, powerful way. And if they can, if they can connect with themselves even deeper, because I don't want to presuppose that they're not connected with themselves. Like,
Mm.
to be doing that work, there has to be some level of connection. And there's all sorts of connotations with like corporate or business people or whatever. But if I can support them, and if we support them with this work to connect even deeper with themselves, to be even more in alignment with what's actually true for themselves as to how they want to be spending their heartbeats and living in this lifetime, to be able to receive the incredible gift of the life that they've created for themselves as well. Yeah, that I feel deeply for that. And I feel that if they can make aligned decisions with what's true for them, that's only a good thing for the world.
Yeah, beautiful. It's kind of like the way I would translate that is like you see quite a big range within them that is available because of their capacity for, I guess, intensity already potentially, right? And that being more maybe on the more quote unquote extreme side of that end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum kind of also has a lot of room to develop, which is exciting. So there's a lot of different kind of work you can do with these people to really bring them into full capacity. To your point, relaxed intensity or calm momentum. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing, Dan. Yeah, the curiosity or the question that arises for me within that is what does intensity look like when it's coming from presence instead of pressure? Like, what are some of the things actually that change in the body, the physiology, and potentially the patterns of mind and emotion? What have you seen in your work with these people that actually shifts for them in a real kind of grounded way?
Yeah, it's probably what your body has done just then. Yeah, if we just like use the
Yeah,
body as
sit
this
back.
ultimate messenger, it went from being like leaning in, which is also really useful sometimes, to kind of like from here. Yeah, so there's like less of
Mm.
the head first winds stripping past the ears and just like gung ho. And what starts to happen is like, hang on a second, like the momentum can continue. So any fear that would have a big reason why business leaders and founders might take it might take a while for them to engage in something like meditation, or why they might not go all in on something like meditation. Some are going all in that, right? But the reason is there can be, and it's quite reasonable, a fear around, if I slow down, if any part of me slows down, what happens to my output? Yeah, like what, like, and if I slow down in this part of my life, does everything that's been created in the external start crashing down? Who's going to take care of that? And am I able to continue engaging in that in the way that it needs to be engaged with if I've slowed down? And it's maybe too risky to even take the risk on that, right? Because there is a lot at stake and a lot of lives that could be affected, not just their own family, but also all the employees and everyone, all the stakeholders and everyone. And so it takes a lot of courage actually to start to lean into finding that stillness and that calm, to allow for that momentum. And so, yeah, what starts to come alive is this, like, and it's not forced, it's this trust in being able to, they've gotten the car to this, to 110 Ks an hour. I don't know how many miles an hour that is. And then taking their foot off the pedal and seeing that, oh yeah, we can cruise through this for a bit. Like, it's okay for us to, like, this speed can continue, and maybe there is a cruise control. If we want to, we can place that. We can click that cruise control button, and the view. We're now viewing from. Oh, but hang on a second. I'm actually seeing more by taking half a step back in my body, in my being. I'm actually, oh wow, this is really useful for me, being able to get even better at finding a solution to my business, or to be able to see the context of what's playing out, and how the team could be operating in a more easeful but highly productive way. So yeah, there's just this. Yeah, I'll speak to the most recent client that's jumped on post-exit, just came out, but still is working partially in the business, and all that they wanted was just peace. Like, just peace. Like, I just want to be able to focus on one thing. Like, I've created the business, sold the business, blah blah blah. I just want to focus on one thing. And then after, but also that trust that I'm talking about, there was a hesitancy to even engage this work for the initial 90-day baseline stabilization program that I offer up, which is this initial 90 days to stabilize your baseline within your nervous system. And then there was a hesitancy to commit to the full 90 days, to the full 12 weeks. It was like, oh, I'll only do the first 6 weeks. And for me, it didn't matter, yeah, whether you're going to commit to the 6 or the 90. Cool. Let's commit to the 6, and you can make a decision from there. And then after 4 weeks, they were just like, I can genuinely call myself a meditator, even though it's the beginning of the journey and there's a long way to go. I didn't think I'd be able to sit for a 10-minute period and actually be able to do that without kicking myself, or sort of like without, like, having a whole bunch of frustration boil up and irritability boil up. And they've spoken to a big identity shift that has happened, that has provided a sense of, like, space in their life, because it's expanded them from being so within the roles that they were in to now including these roles, but they've expanded beyond those roles, and they're seeing themselves beyond that in a way that is difficult to communicate unless you've experienced it and gone through the process yourself, which is why they needed that 6 week. And then immediately they're like, okay, happy to, it's been 4 weeks, but let's commit to the rest of this, and I'm going to continue beyond that as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I really can resonate in my own personal journey, but then also what I've seen with my clients, that the initial step into something like a program, whether it's a meditation program, a breathwork program, coaching of any kind of or self-development work, can be quite, because I think the system kind of knows a big shift is coming. Yeah, and often the shift that we need is not necessarily always what we want as well. So there can be a felt sense of like, oh, something is about to change, but not sure what exactly. And it actually, yeah, like you spoke into that, it can take a fair bit of courage to take that initial step. And then what I've seen with my clients is once they're in and they actually experience the benefit of doing the practice and having that more spacious leaning back in life, still being able to attend to all the things they need to attend to and actually being able to do more, there's sort of this, I guess, safety that develops within the human being that it's okay to relax back a bit more and to find that spaciousness and actually still be able to attend to all life's demands, so to speak, in a useful and probably more useful is what I've seen, a more useful and more actual deep way. Yeah, also really curious to hear how you see that translating into breath. So obviously with FBR breathwork, we work a lot with breath mechanics. Yeah, so we work with when a human lays down on the mat in front of us, and we as a practitioner start to observe their breath patterns and the rhythms of breathing that are often reflected or are very closely linked to the rhythms of feeling, thinking, and therefore behaving and making certain choices in life. Yeah, what are some of the shifts you've seen in in the breathing mechanics of these kind of people? What starts to, generally speaking, if we were to just generalize it a little bit, what starts to change for them in their actual body and breath? And what is some feedback you've received from the people you work with in terms of how they now feel differently in their body?
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna speak to this part to use that as a bit of a bridge into that. You were speaking to, there's these meditation programs and there's these breathwork programs and different programs, right? And I think we know that breathwork is, and this might, we're here, we're all FBR practitioners and so on. The world is loving breathwork right now. It's like lapping it up in different ways. There's different approaches to breath work, but it's lapping it up right now. And so I've asked the question, meditation's almost like the boring cousin right now for people. Why is it that that's kind of mostly of generally speaking, a forgotten thing? And I think because there's so much stimulus in the world, breath work in this very like overarching way has people, it's a beautiful opportunity to come into those states of relaxation because it has people feel like they're still doing something. They're still occupied in doing something and engaged with something. Whereas to sit in stillness and silence is really difficult. And I think it's really important for a human being to be able to sit for 10 to 30 minutes in stillness and silence and that full end of the spectrum without doing anything. And if you need to start at 2 seconds to begin that journey, that's awesome, right? To start at 2 seconds. And I have some people starting at 2 seconds. But we need to be able to sit in stillness and silence. If a human can't sit with themselves for those 10 to 30 minutes of stillness and silence, I'm sure most people would agree that that's going to have that person feel a little bit caged in because whenever there is stillness or silence, there's an irritability that kicks up. And that might be because of super deep patterns. And so that's why just starting with 2 seconds might be great, plus engaging other modalities. So I'm just saying that as a meditation's almost the relaxed part that our systems are scared of and are scared of the intensity of silence and stillness. Yeah. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
important to keep
Yeah.
that in. And then breath work. When it comes to business leaders and founders and their breathwork journeys and what that looks like. So I'll bring in meditation as a modality, but also working with them in one-to-one breathwork, in a one-to-one breathwork capacity. And so it might be useful for me to paint the picture as to what might the system look like and how might it be expressing when they first start with FBR breathwork, and
Mm-hmm.
then what does it progress to? And when it starts with FBR breathwork, we're looking for activation and then integration and relaxation. Not 5 minutes, but equal, 30 to 40 minutes of this and 30 minutes of activation. That 30 to 40 minutes of the relaxation piece for a lot of maybe founders or business leaders might last like 15 minutes. And the reason for that is that system has had the activation, it's had the peak, it's kind of starting to come down. It starts to touch into a closer space of immense amount of stillness and silence, which can sound awfully loud if you haven't spent all that much time in that space and haven't necessarily stabilized and acclimatized to stillness and silence and what that highlights as a contrast. And so that's super. There's nothing wrong with that. It's perfect where they're at that point in time. It's a protective mechanism. Maybe, for whatever reason, stillness and silence wasn't safe earlier on, and a vigilance was necessary. Growing up, a hypervigilance was necessary to be able to constantly keep track of everything that was going on and everything that was happening, and make sure that you're engaged all of the time. To be disengaged could have been a threat to whatever it may have been happening in the household or whatever else. But I'm linking it to that. Might not necessarily be linked to that. Can also be linked to work or whatever else. And so,
Or just
yeah,
our
normally
Western conditioning into more of productivity, like
yeah,
generally speaking, in the West, there's more of a value placed on that. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, just
that's
to add
right.
to
And
that.
so the
Yeah.
body, yeah, for sure. The body's laying there, and where we would normally see someone be in complete stillness, just laying there for maybe 10 to 15 minutes, there might be moving around, a temptation to open the eyes, and a subtle irritability that's playing out. So that's one thing that's happening that can be happening at the beginning. The other pieces might be, bringing in a decent amount of activation, volume of breath, and then clonking out, and kind of almost from the beginning. Whereas normally we would expect that towards the end of a journey, or after the peak somewhere, there's a clonking out early on, and then they go again and clonking out, and then they go again and clonking out. And this is very reflective if you take that and map it, layer it over how their life might look. And
Yeah.
so that can often happen. Um,
So
and
kind of
then
over efforting in the nervous system to collapse, kind of like over efforting collapse. Is that
yeah,
how
the
would
the
you?
incredibly wise mechanism of collapse kicks in, the safety switch
Mm,
of the circuitry, so that the system doesn't overload. It's
mm,
remembering to be for myself as a practitioner, to be in awe of that rather than making that wrong. That wow,
yeah.
there is an
Hmm.
intelligence that has zero to do with that person's prefrontal cortex and thinking mind. There is an intelligence in this system in front of me that has the capacity to be able to switch it off from the activation and volume that's going on, so that the whole system doesn't clonk out. And it does it without any, whether they're aware of it or not.
Hmm.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, can we expand that
Mm,
system so that it can activate in a healthy way, and have that expand, and then, genuinely restore and relax on the other end? And that's I guess where the work is, and that's the direction over, a series and an arc of treatments, or a session arc that we might go through, where I might work with someone at a minimum of 8 sessions across an arc. And what starts to come alive is this sense of ease in the relaxation piece. You can see and observe and witness from the outside a genuine restfulness. And that, even that word, I feel, would be music to a lot of, business leaders or entrepreneur, a genuine restfulness. Oh, give me a break just for a moment. Because I'm
mm,
holding so much and doing such an incredible job at holding so much, but it'd be great to put some of those plates down. It'd be great to just put some of
mm,
those spinning plates down. And so, to see that in their systems, and then have them come out and share, I don't think I've rested like that in a very long time, if ever, is a very common thing that comes through. I can't believe the amount of clarity that I got on something that has been sitting with me for, one person said, the last 7 years, and I just haven't been able to articulate it. But because they've allowed that spaciousness and the restfulness, all of a sudden they're able to, these things that are coming through the mind have less of a forest to need to get through in mind. So there's more spaciousness in mind because it's not so congested. The path isn't so congested with a whole bunch of stuff in mind because stillness and silence, the capacity to relax in the system, has expanded and allowed that space between the trees. What felt like 100 trees in a corridor that was 10 meters wide, all of a sudden feels like just two trees in a corridor that's a kilometer wide, right? And so there's all this spaciousness. It's like, oh, I
Mm.
can see clearly through now. I get it. I can see this is amazing. I feel safe because I can see further than just 2 feet in front of me, which places my whole system in ease in terms of how I'm living life, that it's not like only ever seeing the meter in front of me and I don't even know what turn I'm going to need to take in 2 seconds. So that's yeah. And then being able to, on the other end, the activation piece, seeing a body start to be able to take these longer, fuller breaths and being able to stay with that and noticing a suppleness and a softness in the system that's representative of ease whilst they're activating. What? Like they can both happen together?
Mm.
Like you've got this incredible activation and volume that's coming through, and there's this body that's just supple there and able to bring that volume through. It's a big shift that starts to occur for the person observing that, and I can only imagine what that feels like, for them on their specific journey and so on.
I love
Yeah,
what you're
thank you.
speaking into, Dan. I think while I know specifically in this conversation we've been speaking to your Yes and Conscious Leadership Group and your founders and business owners, but I think that we can equally apply this to our women, our listeners that we're listening to here. It's not something that's just specific to the founders and business owners. And if I could share something that potentially will have some of our listeners resonate with. But, from my experience, something I've been noticing in myself lately is there's a sense of safety in movement and in activation. And I wonder for these business owners and founders that you work with, Dan, and then for our highly functioning or capable women who are doing it all or holding it all together, is that relationship with activation and doing something that we could also sort of explore and unpack itself. I know that for myself, if I'm doing something and that can just be organizing or cleaning or creating or working, I feel steady in that. And I'm not necessarily referring to the sense that there is a really a relaxed intensity there. And look, maybe there is. You might tell me there is, but I think what I'm noticing is when I slow down on the opposite, there's a subtle anxiety under that. So on the other side, there's a discomfort being there. So while it looks like the activating and the constant doing is productive, I'm actually internally, I believe, using it as a bit of a regulation. Like the regulation is coming from keeping myself moving. So I think that it's healthy to ask this. And I think the question to you is, Dan, I'm curious about, is there a benefit in, yeah, just sitting with our relationship to the activating or the doing, or potentially the other side, the slowing down and the safety? In my experience, is it the doing that feels good, for example, or is it just the relief of not having to be in the stillness?
Yeah, I love this, and I love that you're bringing it in. I also we are in the We Are Woman podcast, so I do work with women as well, and
Well, I work with you, Dan. I'm bringing
yeah,
things in that I know that I've explored with you and Sarah too, but I've worked with both of you. I'm very lucky in that sense.
yeah, and this applies. It's different in the business world. It's different from human to human. We were kind of generically speaking there, but it would still be incredibly necessary to see the difference from human to human, and then go beyond the humans that are business leaders or entrepreneurs. Actually, here's a bridge, right? My belief is that there is an inner leader within every single human. It's just that most
Yeah, I love
humans
that.
don't consider themselves to be a leader. So as a healthy, functioning human, there is a necessity but also a privilege and a responsibility to be able to meet the medicine of life, to be able to lead ourselves through that. And at some point in time, what might latch onto ourselves is a family, to support a partner, a life partner, and to be supported by a life partner, to support these little humans and have them be able to stand on their own 2 feet, to be able to fly the nest in a really healthy way, right? Is the, overarching responsibility of a parent. And so these roles are no less important than, say, running a business or as an entrepreneur, and they are so full of the quality of leading and the act of leading. With leadership's a stagnant word, and so it's really leading is what we're talking about, because it's that in action. And I think there's a few layers to what you were sharing there, Mel, where it's probably not a black and white answer around, cool, there's on one level, there's a form of regulation actually that's happening in the system when you're in the doing and actively engaged in the doing. And there's a regulation, and it's really useful. Sitting in stillness and silence is necessary to be able to do that, but isn't always the answer and is insufficient alone. Yeah. It just really feeds the capacity to be able to find relaxation in all of the doing, right? Movement is a way of processing, is a way of regulating the nervous system. And so on one level, I feel that that might be happening. Yeah. Then on another level, it probably comes down to one word, and that word is safety and feeling safe. Yeah. Movement versus stillness. It may feel more safe for the system there to be in that movement. Why does it something feel safe? Because it might be familiar, and it might be what's known best. And what's known best for the psyche here will feel, it'll be drawn to that, and it'll feel more comfortable, even if it's not serving us. Yeah. But some parts of it, nuance is really important. Some parts of it are serving us, but also maybe some parts not. And so how do we find that balance and simply be able to expand beyond that and gently, in good time, start to expand our capacity and to find safety in a little bit of that stillness, and a little bit of that, and find ease in a restfulness and in a relaxed state. But we don't have to throw the doing out. Yeah, we don't have to throw the intensity of doing out that feels so good to the system and so familiar and it's so known. We don't have to throw that out. But let's just, whilst this is playing out, let's gently expand this side as well. Yeah, because again, it's no different for, say, a mother. And I'm not going to pretend to know what life is like for a mother. Yeah. But if a mother, very similar to the business owner, starts to consider, if I'm to spend more time in stillness, silence, and slowing down, who the fuck is going to do everything? Who's going to do everything? Tell me that. Is he going to do it? Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Yep.
All right. And it's no different to, the business leader and the baby that they've got, and like the family that they've got in terms of the employees and so on and so on. And so it's gently and bit by bit finding safety in that, and allowing the system to start to realize its strength, power, and capacity to be able to engage both relaxation and the activity in life at the same time. And it's not, I say realized rather than to acquire or get the capacity to be able to do that, because it's something that's already so deeply inherently alive within the system from when we are born. It's alive within the system to be able to engage in that way. It might need to spend some time in an environment to adapt to it in this way and so on, but it has the capacity to do that, to adapt to the fullest degree, right? And so, yeah, it is not something you need to try and reach from out there in here. The system just needs a little bit of support to feel safe enough to allow the process of remembering that capacity and realizing that capacity within itself. And safety is key, which is why,
Yeah.
environment is so important in the things that environment in our home, waking life, eyes open, is important, but also in any processes like breath work and so on, so that the system feels safe and can open up a little more, open up a little more.
Mm.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I loved it. That was such a great exploration and yeah, I'm loving this conversation, Dan. Honestly, it's so good to have you on here.
Feels so good to be on here.
A lot of what I aim to do and how I can maintain a level of capacity is through these practices that we're speaking through today. And having coached with both you, Dan, and you, Sarah, I've been able to to apply these modalities that we're talking about in lived time. Going back to the suggestion, Dan, of the meditation and the sitting practices, I genuinely do those. Thanks to you, Dan and Sarah, holding me accountable to those. So I'm actually on a 40-day streak for my 20-minute sitting practice, and I can't tell you how useful and helpful that has been because I'm in a very busy season, a very highly stressful season. We are selling a house. I have a rather sick child at the moment who has been sick for a few weeks. And I have noticed upon reflection how much I have been able to have more clarity online and also a greater capacity. And I was reflecting recently in the shower where we do most of our reflecting time. I was honestly honoring, you guys as my coaches, but these tools that we have. The other night, for example, I had a very sick child and I had to call an ambulance, and he had seemingly gotten very close to not breathing. But what I was able to do in the time and not at all reject what was happening in my body. So my nervous system responded in what was a very healthy way. It started shaking at the time, but I was able not to push that down or push that aside. I was able to register through probably my FBR breath work and being able to notice that state and go, okay, the nervous system is shaking on behalf of probably the fear of watching my child sick. And that's normal and healthy. That's okay. Let's let that go. I let it shake. That was cool. And then I was able to talk to it was my son. I was able to talk to him calmly. And I'm like, okay, cool. So not only am I now have the capacity to hold this state, I've actually got some space in mind, you know, my sitting practices. I'm on a 40-day streak now. So I was able to speak calmly and hold that while also shaking, but not feeling panicked in any of that. And what really brought it home was, and this is one of the greatest things I think a mother could hear, and really any woman in a situation that would be similar to this. But my child said to me, only 2 days later, "Oh, Mum, I couldn't breathe and I felt awful and I thought I was going to die." He's young. So he said, "I thought I was going to die, but I just looked at you and you were so calm." And I thought, okay, Mum's calm. So everything's going to be okay. And that is a lived experience of this stuff that we're talking to. And I feel so honored to be able to have had these tools and these modalities that have come from both you two and Edward. But in terms of, I have a regular sitting practice that I'm now holding myself accountable. I do myself, I go through FBR breathwork sessions myself. And then I can also apply some of the NLP coaching and things like that. But that's what it means to be a woman in this world right now, is to engage in practices that give me space. And it's not about regulating. It wasn't like a regulation thing at the time I regulated. I was like, cool, nervous system's doing this thing, it's shaking, and that's okay. And that for me right now is being a woman in this world and having space to be able to do all the things I need to do, plus be able to show up at work the next day or have been at work that day, or to be a sister, a daughter, a friend, a mother, all those things. That's what it is. It's these tools. This is why I'm here, and this is why I'm on this podcast. This is why I do what I do. So thank you for inviting me to share that.
Yeah, well, I loved hearing that, and we're on this podcast, and where FBR breathwork as a modality and practice gets a fair mention, and then there's practices like meditation, and there's a whole bunch of other practices, right? And I think that's a great example. What you shared, Mel, it's a great example of at least my philosophy with this and with living is that it's really important to note that the work, we have the practices to allow us, to give us more ease of access to be able to handle those intensities, the things that are playing out, and it might be a child that's sick in the moment. Yeah. Life itself, we don't need to go out there. I think there can be often this energy of like, if I do all of this work, then I'm not going to start trembling in the face of my child being sick and shaking in it, because you you knew how to hold that and how to interpret that because of your training. But it would be so reasonable and easy for another human to feel like they need to go off and do a bunch of work so that they wouldn't, because they reacted in this way when their child was sick and they were shaking. But you could see that that was a healthy and normal part of the process for the nervous system. And so life really does offer up all of the lived experiences that are necessary for us to expand our capacity. And if we can, the work really can be most useful, in my opinion, if it's focused on supporting the human to be able to be with whatever life is throwing up. If we can support the humans to be with the child that's sick, the partner that's, the challenging conversation that's there, the difficult decision that needs to be made, where we're going to live, all of the bits and pieces, if we can develop the capacity to be with that, then life's work is to be with that and allow that to run through us and to like bring up the things it does, and it'll bring up all the patterns from whenever. And if we can be with it, then we can healthily process it, and so on and so on. So the work is simply living often, and hopefully having stabilized in the capacity to be able to be with that. And I love your healthy holding of these practices that you have, and also the receiving of the practice that life offers up.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dan. Thank you. Thank you. You have a big part of that.
Yeah, no practitioner can ever do it for anyone, right? And we know that like we can't do it for someone. And it really requires the person to be able to meet the work, meet life, meet the medicine, yeah, whatever form it's taking. So yeah, well done, and yeah, it has been an absolute uh, yeah, privilege and pleasure to be able to spend that time working together.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Mel and Sarah. Take a moment here and just breathe. Inhale and exhale. Maybe what this conversation opens up is a slightly different way of relating to your life. Learning how to meet what's here with a little more ease, whether it's activation or stillness, anger, sadness, fear, or even joy, love, and expansion. All of it. Because maybe relaxed intensity isn't about controlling your state, but having the capacity to be with whatever arises. to move when it's time to move, to rest when it's time to rest, and not need either to define you. And that's where something really powerful opens up, in becoming more available to your full experience. That's what feels so grounded about this work and about the way Dan approaches it. Supporting people to access more of who they are already, with more capacity, more presence, and more range. So as you move through your day, just notice, where am I pushing? Where am I avoiding? And what would it feel like to meet the moment with a little more ease?
So that's all from us today. Thank you so much for tuning in to We Are Woman. I hope today's conversation gave you something to reflect on, to feel into, or to carry with you into the rest of your week. Please make sure to click subscribe on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss the latest episodes as they drop. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a woman that would find it helpful, because this isn't just our podcast, it's all of ours, together. You can also follow us on Instagram at We Are Woman Podcast to stay connected, share your thoughts, and join our growing sisterhood. We've got some very special events planned and would love for you to be a part of them. Thank you for being here.